welcome to the first session of the set of seminars or sessions that we have for the next 3 days. My name is Muhammad Harun. I am basically on the academic committee for OCAF and IRSICA for this region. And so myself and along with Professor Suleiman Dango and others have been able to try to work through this particular program as we have it. As you will see from the program, that we have tried to slot each particular set of presentations into themes so that you have an idea as to what they intend to basically say. Let me just also say 2 or 3 things. One, in terms of the earlier session, we had heard Professor McCracken basically make reference to Professor Salman Nadwi. And perhaps maybe we should use this opportunity of basically paying our tribute to both Nadwis for having really established Islamic studies here at the University of Durban-Westville, which used to be in 1974. And of course, unfortunately, both departments basically came to an end in the 1990s as they were downsizing programs and projects here in South Africa. And as a result, the department, of course, died, so to speak, and it was merged with other departments. So that is one. Secondly is that we heard Suleiman Dango making his keynote presentation. We basically felt that because he was a co-organizer of this particular conference, as well as having been very much involved in Islamic studies, we need to give him that honor, and that is the reason why we have honored him with that sort of basic presentation as the keynote. So in a sense, of course, as Zainul Kaji indicated, he basically stimulated our thoughts as to how to look at the notion of civilization, because there are lots. It's a loaded term, and we need to understand that. And of course, he basically shared that with us. That having been said, let me just come to 1, 2, or 3 things. Again, just firstly is that we have a number of researchers and scholars around that have much interest in sort of our region, and we have one scholar by the name of Ibrahim Roda, who was a former principal at a school from Cape Town. He basically had authored a book entitled The Strand Muslim Community from 1822 until 1966. The book will be on sale. This particular book is a Sadaqatul Jariyah project, so to speak, in a sense that he has written it with a passion and, of course, with the interest that people will basically purchase a copy, and whatever profits thereof comes will go to the community. So in that sense, we sort of hopefully also we will have some other books also available for you during the course of the 2 or 3 days. Let me just come to now before we're just going to introduce our 2 presenters or 3 presenters. The third one is not here, so I'm also the third one, Qasimi from India. So my name is Muhammad Harun, but I'm also representing him. We will try to stick to the timeline. We know it's Jummah as such, so we'll try to basically squeeze it within our time frame. And we ask and request each of the chairpersons who will be chairing to also stick to the timeline and our presenters. I know you cannot sometimes squeeze in ideas that you have basically gathered over many years or so over the year, over a few months, within 20 minutes, but be that as it may, we would like you just to share the gist of your thoughts so that at least we can sort of mull over it, think about it, and discuss it. So I think with that, let us come to our presenters. This morning we have 3 presenters. We have looked at the notion of transnational relations, and the reason for basically looking at that, because both Argun and Qasimi have been looking particularly at the Ottoman connections with the region, as well as Qasimi looking at the Deoband or South Asian connection with the region. And then we have a more conceptual presentation by Dr. Auda. So we will sort of hear these individuals' ideas, and so we will start off with Dr. Argun making his presentation on the Ottoman connection with Southern Africa. Thank you.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to welcome each and every one of you in this auspicious day, in this auspicious event that is being jointly organized by IRSICA, Awqafsa, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal. My topic today is the connections between the Ottoman world and Southern Africa. But to follow up the ideas that have been presented by Professor Suleiman Dangor, as an introductory remarks, I would like to say a few things at the beginning of my talk. When we look at the history of Islamic civilization, we realize that there were four major challenges, four major phases that the Muslim world had to face. The first one was in the 12th century, namely the Crusaders. The main idea behind the Crusaders was to eliminate any political hegemony between Europe and the Jerusalem. It was a big challenge for Muslims. There were bloody wars that continued over a century. The second main major challenge was the Mongol invasion. It physically threatened the existence of Islamic civilization. However, these two challenges did not last long because they had no intellectual dimensions. But the third one was the 19th century European colonization and imperialism. It had intellectual dimensions and it was more devastating than the previous two ones. And in the fourth and last major challenge that we have been facing, we have been experiencing at this moment, what can be summarized as Islam against Islam, the inter-civilizational conflicts, problems that have been going today in different parts of the Islamic world. It's very unfortunate. So, 19th century was a decisive century for Islamic civilization. It was also related to my topic today because in this century there were three major empires that have been demolished or collapsed. One of them was Ottoman Empire or Ottoman Khilafah, as we properly put it. So, what is the weight and place and the role of Ottoman Khilafah or Ottoman Empire in the history of Islamic civilization? And in particular, what was the relationship of Ottomans with Southern Africa? Before embarking on this topic, I would like to introduce to some of our audience some of the characteristics and salient features of Ottoman Empire. There are four blends that we can talk of in the Ottoman. When we talk about the Ottoman Empire, there are four main characteristics. Number one is the Turks and the Ottomans were an integral part of what we call Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the mainstream, this Ahl Sunnah school of thought. The second one is the love of Ahl Bayt. In Turkey or in Ottoman tradition, we do have mahabba and love towards the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whether Sayyid or Ashraf. The third main characteristic of Ottomans is the tradition of irfani gelenek, what we call it in Turkish, that is the Sufi interpretation of Islam. Throughout the centuries, neither in Seljuki times, nor in Ottoman, nor even in the modern Republic, we do not have in those areas the Salafi interpretation of Islam. Always it was Sufi inclined interpretation of Sunni school of thought. The fourth and the last characteristic of Ottomans and the Turks in general, that is the tradition that we inherited from Mawara Nahir, the school of philosophy, mathematics, and rationality from the plains of Central Asia. So Ottoman Empire and the school of thought that was in the household of the Ottomans was the amalgamation of these four distinct characteristics. So let's come back to our point. It was the last Islamic or Muslim empire, if I may use the term, that ruled over 40 million square meters in what we call today Middle East, North Africa, South Europe, Caucasia, and also some vassal states in Central Africa as well. For centuries, Ottoman Empire was a counterbalance for any European colonization or European encroachments. So with the demise of Ottomans, the Islamic world became fragile, Islamic world became open for colonization or for Orientalism, for European imperialism in short. So it was an equilibrium to even prevent some missionary activities in different parts of the Islamic world. Where's the, okay. Does it work? Okay, just carry on, please. Next one. Okay. So, since I did my master's in at RAO previously, today's University of Johannesburg in Islamic Studies, on Abu Bakr Effendi and his thought and contribution to Islamic culture in South Africa, and it was one of the main connections between the Ottoman world and the South African Muslims in the 19th century. Sheikh Abu Bakr Effendi, as we pronounce it in the Cape, was a Kurdish scholar from Shahrizor, today's northern Iraq, and he was well versed in Maqasid al-Sharia and also in Islamic jurisprudence, and he was sent as upon a request by South African Muslims through Kostati Musurus Pasha in London, and then he was sent there, and he had a tremendous legacy. Even though I did my master's about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, now looking at back the history and his impact, I just realized very recent phenomena. The most important legacy of Effendi in the context of 19th century and colonization and imperialism was rebuild the self-esteem and the self-confidence of the Muslim community in Cape Town. This was, I think, the greatest legacy. I mean, he built up schools, as you can see, Ottoman school for boys, Ottoman school for girls. He got married with the niece of Captain James Cook, a British lady, reverted to Islam, and he had his son at the bottom, Ataullah Effendi. He was the first Muslim candidate in the British Parliament in Cape Town, representing the Muslim community in the parliament, even though he was well versed in 7 languages and brilliant academic. In one night, the British colonial administration changed the law, and he was prevented from the election that he supposed to win. So he was sent as an Ottoman ambassador to Sri Lanka and was unfortunately assassinated by the so-called the British spies in that region, and he is buried now in Singapore with the royal graveyard. So any South Africans travel to that part of the world should pay a visit and read Fatiha for Ahmed Ataullah Effendi. And also he had his brothers, as you can see on the picture bottom left. Effendi brought the fez, Ottoman fez making machine to change the dress code. And it was quite shocking for me when I read that the Anzac soldiers, Anzacs are the Australian and New Zealand soldiers who participated in the First World War in 1914 and 15, when they dropped by the Cape port. They left their guns and rifles in their warship, military ship. So, but once they stepped their foot into the land, they ran back immediately to their ships. They thought that the place was an Ottoman city, because Abu Bakr Effendi's impact was so noticeable in the region. So everybody was wearing a Muslim dress, and like Istanbul gentleman or woman. So they had, this was a cultural shock for them. So this piece of information, in fact, illustrates the real legacy of Effendi. So not only as a scholar, we don't have the tradition of Occidentalism vis-a-vis the Orientalism in our part of the world, but Effendi came as not as a missionary, but to teach the local Muslims after 146 years of Dutch colonialism, because there were lost generations in Cape. They were not able to learn or practice their religion. So after Effendi, we can continue. Yes, I would like to quote Steve Biko here. The greatest weapon in the hands of the colonizers is the minds of the oppressed people, because traditionally speaking, our ulama always try to emphasize on building the self-confidence in Muslim communities. And after the colonial experience, that bitter experience, the Muslims, not only in this part of the world, but anywhere in the world, lose their self-esteem, lose their faith in their values, in their civilization, in their religion. Scholars must emphasize on this point. I think Effendi did a good job in this regard. Next, please. So just to give you one example, this is the book, the first page of the book, Bayanuddin, written by Abu Bakr Effendi. It is in Ottoman script, but in Afrikaans language. So when you start reading these Arabic sentences, the person next to you hearing your voice will understand this is an Afrikaans language. So he joined this two language. There is no any other example of this type of literature genius in the history of Islamic civilization. Next, please. So, but in 19th century, things have changed. Ottoman Empire, Ottoman Khilafah lost its eminency, and also it affected badly the Muslim communities around the world. I've been working in the Ottoman archives, which one of the richest archives in the world. There are more than 150 million original manuscripts and documents. And I take this opportunity to invite the local scholars to write or rewrite or reread the history of Africa, history of South Africa, history of Islam in Africa through this valuable treasury. So I came across with the hundreds, if not thousands, of documents with regard to Muslim minorities' correspondence to Ottoman Khilafah, asking their help, asking their assistance in fighting the colonialism. Next, please. Because of the time constraints, I'm not going into much details. So, more specifically, in concrete terms, what were the engagement of Ottomans in Southern Africa? Military cooperation. We are now in Durban, in Natal, in Zululand, and the Ottomans had a good relationship with the Zulu king. Ottoman Empire sent some high military officials to train Zulu troops against the British occupiers. So the Mozambique also has interesting history. The Musa bin Imbik and his followers sent a requesting letter to Ottoman Sultan, and from Yemen governorship he sent 4 battalions to Mozambique in helping those Muslims against the Spanish and Portuguese. Even it was a new information for us even that Sultan Abdulhamid II sent a special military envoy, emissary to South Africa to observe the Boer Wars which took place between Afrikaners and the British. So we have a documentation in the next slide, and also we have as a last point in this section that Ottoman Empire participated in a number of trade fairs and exhibitions in many cities in South Africa, be it Port Elizabeth or Kimberley, even in Johannesburg. Next, please. So this is Afrikai Janubi Muharabasi in Ottoman language, the South African War penned by Mahmud Mukhtar Pasha. It's more than 120 pages of the observations of a military officer in the Boer Wars. Inshallah, we plan to publish this very soon. Next, please. So, not only politically, but also there were some occasions that Ottoman sultans sent some of money. For instance, everybody knows, I am sure, in Forsbrook, Johannesburg, Newtown Mosque. where Maulana Bam for a long time was the Imam, if I'm not mistaken. So it was originally, I discovered in the Ottoman archives that it was called Hamidiye Mosque, and it was built by the donation of Sultan Abdul Hamid II. The next one is, before we going to the next one, during the 19th century as well, Ottoman Empire, upon request of some Muslims, local Muslims, did issue Ottoman passport for South Africans. And there were also South Africans voluntarily participated in the Balkan Wars and also Trablus Cup War in Northern Africa in order to fight with the Ottoman army against the Italians. So there were some special medals, gold medals, issued or minted for the South African soldiers by the Ottoman administration in Istanbul. Next one, please. So this is the new town mosque, Hamadiye or Hamidiye Mosque. Anything, any word Hamidiye anywhere in the world, in Sri Lanka, in Singapore, Hamidiye denotes the Sultan Abdul Hamid or Hamidian establishment. So this was in 1906, where even Mahatma Gandhi addressed or delivered his famous speech in this historical mosque. Next, please. But this was the historical perspective in a bird's eye view. But what are the Turks today doing in Africa? There is a heavy Turkish involvement in many parts of Africa, and we always get questions. Okay, what are you guys doing here in Africa? Are you coming back to Africa, etc.? Well, we are, as Professor Dangur mentioned, we are living in an age of nation state. We have to be very realistic, but and also it's not only for the cause of for the sake of Allah, but there are, as put by our Prime Minister or President, it's a partnership among the equals. Partnership among the equals. Partnership in economy, in finance, commerce, or in academics, or even in the civil society level. So the Turkish openings, thank you very much, in Africa can be summarized with these three concepts. It's economic, to strengthen economic ties or academic ties, student and staff mobilization between academic institutions, which we have been trying with the UCT, UJ, IPSA for the last years. So there is an ongoing mutual interest between the Turkish side and African side, especially for the last decade and a half. There is a growing interest from the Turkish side with its different institutions. Next one, please. So these are the basic or major institutions. The Turkish Development and Cooperation Agency, TİKA, has been doing many developmental work in different parts of the world. There is a TRT World, the Turkish State Television, Anadolu Agency, which we have the representatives here among us now, and Yunus Emre Institute to promote the Turkish culture and language, and also Turkish bursary program, the Turkish scholarship program. I do have at Istanbul University some South African students came through this program. And of course, İrsika, His Excellency here, doing some intellectual and cultural programs in Africa, and also Turks and related communities abroad do some different projects in Africa. So these are the major Turkish formal and informal state or non-governmental initiatives that have been working in the field in Africa for the last decade and a half once again. So the potential is there. The potential is there. We have historical ties. We have willing politicians from both sides. Now, as we speak, the Turkish Prime Minister with more than 50 businessmen is in his trip to Africa, in Western Africa, as we speak now. So there is an ongoing interest, but we have to remember one thing. Any political engagement won't long last unless there is a civil society engagement, unless the NGOs and the Awqaf take and assume responsibility in order to strengthen the ties between two Muslim or to even different regions. That's why once the last, I don't have any time, So, yeah, as Erdogan always put it, win-win economic relationship, active humanitarian aid, strategic partnership, and bilateral agreements ongoing in Africa and between Africa and Turkey. In concluding, I would like to once more thank Brother Zeynul, Mikhail, and others who work in the Awqafsa, and also His Excellency Dr. Halit Eren for providing us this opportunity to come together, scholars, students, researchers who have an interest in the history of Islamic civilization in the region. And I would like to thank you for your patience and kind participation. Shukran.
Thanks very much for that. I think he basically triggered so many thoughts in my mind regarding the basic connection between the Ottoman Turks and this region. And just as a matter of interest, here in Durban, there was a magazine known as Al-Islam, which was printed between 1907 and 1910. Unfortunately, one of the researchers thought it was an Arabic newspaper at the time, but it was in Gujarati. Be that as it may, the editor of that particular newspaper was awarded an award by the Ottoman Turks for his particular support, of course, for the Ottoman Empire. So there are connections that are there that we need to, and as he so rightly indicated, that need to be researched and to be brought to light and to demonstrate the connection that had been there and that basically we seem to have forgotten. So there's a need for rewriting our own history into the history text. And I think that cannot be overemphasized. But I think let's leave it at that. Let's come to our next presenter, Professor Auda, who's basically also connected. Basically, both speakers have been connected to South Africa, as we just heard, to the University of Johannesburg, now formerly Rand Afrikaans University, where Selim did his master's degree, and now Professor Auda is connected to IPSA. And I think those connections are critically important for us in terms of sharing the basic intellectual sort of interests and so forth. So let's call upon Dr. Auda to make his presentation.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for all the organizers for this wonderful bringing together of so many ideas and so many backgrounds. And it's such a pleasure to speak in South Africa in the name of Al-Shatibi Chair of Maqasid Studies. It's a kind of running ahead of myself because the inauguration of this chair is next week, but it's such a pleasure. The point I would like to make, inshallah within the time or less, is the role of Muslim minorities in reviving the Islamic civilization in the next stage. I do believe that Muslim minorities, whether in the West or in the East, and we're talking about South Africa as an example, have a major role to play in reimagining and reviving the Islamic civilization in the next while, in the next stage. And I think that they are better situated than even Muslim majorities where they are now, whether we are talking about the motherland in the Arab world of Islam, or we're talking about Muslim majorities everywhere. I think that Muslim minorities are better situated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. The days alternate between people. And there was a sharp rise in the Muslim civilization since the revelation of Iqra. And it was a fantastic civilization that took over the world really as a paradigm of thought and everything that comes with the thought for centuries. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will that civilizations rise and fall, and so the Islamic civilization went into a decline, and Western civilization was on the rise, and we are still living, I would say, the age of the Western civilization as we are now. It is a hope that there is a new rise and a new revival of the Islamic civilization, and, if you wish, a new contribution to humanity by the Islamic civilization. But we need to learn lessons from others. How Western civilization rose was by learning from the Islamic civilization. It's a fact that is beyond the scope of this talk, but you could research it if you are not aware of this fact, that without the contribution of the Islamic civilization, the Renaissance as we know it, Western civilization as we know it, would not have emerged. The thoughts, the products, the organizations, so many things that was borrowed and then developed. So both borrowed and developed. And when they were borrowed, they were critiqued and they were modified to fit the context of Europe at that time. And then they were developed much further than what the Western Islamic civilization had developed. As Muslims, we need to learn this lesson. We need to build on the human achievement of Western civilization so that we can reimagine the Islamic civilization. We cannot rebuild the Islamic civilization from the point of centuries ago when the Islamic civilization was still in a good shape. But we need to rebuild on what others had built in their civilization. Also, we need to be able to critique what they achieved and critique it after understanding it very well. And that's where Muslim minorities, I would say, could contribute the most, because Muslim minorities are part of the Western civilization. If you're talking about minorities in the Western civilization, in the West, or minorities here, they are more capable of critiquing that civilization and every